Hi, my name is Jackson Mann.
My name is Corbin Al, and we're going to be talking about Chapter 9, which is World War One, NACA, and the end of the right patent litigation.
Awesome. And
Yeah.
then the sections there we're going to be covering are World War One, like I said, National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, and then the cross licensing agreements. All right.
So let's dive into this. So World War One, obviously, uh, airplanes and stuff, they were in its infancy. So, and at the beginning of the war, Europe was far ahead of the United States with
Mhm.
their aircraft development. Like
Yep.
we talked about in class, there was those the three mains is England, France, and Germany. With England with the Sopwith Pup and Camel, those were their two main dogs.
Yeah.
And then French had the French Newport, and then that one with the really long name, the Spad. And then Germany had the Hunkers, the Albatross, and the Fokker, like we had talked about a little bit. And I just want to talk about a little bit more on the Fokker because I did some research and we talked about how the Red Baron flew this type of plane, and it was regarded as like the best fighter in Germany during the war. That's
Yeah.
why obviously the Red Baron was doing his thing. He had the most kills, and a lot of people regard the or credit the plane because it was so much more advanced than the other ones.
Mhm.
And in my notes, yeah, it was developed by um, a man by the name of Anthony Fokker for Germany. He was
Okay.
the and he developed the what is it called? The interrupter gear for the propellers and the machine guns. So when they were able to finally put machine guns on the planes, they wouldn't chop off the propeller pretty much. So
Yeah. So they
yes,
use this plane for the the bad guys, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and he was doing some damage to the Allies, but
Yeah.
gotta give him some respect. He was doing his thing,
Hmm.
and then so when we bring it back to the United States, we learn that Glenn Curtiss was responsible for the only American design, the MB-1 bomber that we talked about, and some other American contributions to the war were the bomber, like I just mentioned, the Jenny that was used for trainers. They made a lot of them,
Hmm.
and the Liberty engine, which we'll get into in a little bit.
Yeah.
So the impact and the importance of aviation during World War One. Obviously, we know now how important like reconnaissance and intelligence is, but even back then, when they were just using their like paper wooden gliders with no guns, pilots used to make they used to make written observations. So they get like a piece of paper, they'd fly over, they'd try and draw the movements or whatever, write it down. This was before they attached cameras, and then they realized, oh, this is good. So they threw some cameras on there,
Yeah.
and the enemy planes wouldn't shoot each other. They would just fly around. Sometimes they'd even wave. They'd throw a wave or something.
Yeah.
And then everybody started to realize like, okay, recon and intelligence is really important. So that's when everybody started shooting each other up in the sky. So they started at first it was just pistols and like service rifles, but then eventually some guy had the great idea to strap on a machine gun, which led to that interrupter gear that I had mentioned earlier. And then now we had biplanes with the Lewis guns on top of them shooting at each other. So
Yeah. So how did all
yeah.
this kind of affect the aircraft industry?
Well, how it affected them, like obviously since the need and importance for aircrafts during World War One went up,
Hmm.
so the Europeans were like, "Yo, America, we need more airplanes."
Yeah.
So this is a perfect segue into like how the U.S. Aircraft industry was affected by this whole thing, like you'd mentioned. So the European countries, specifically England and France, they reached out to the US, was like, we need you guys for production, for military production of aircrafts. And NACA, the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, was formed, and they were recommended that the US to produce 22,000 aircraft, which we know that we learned in class we didn't reach anywhere near, but they tried. But yeah, they made the Havilland D4 bomber and an observation plane, which was I'm gonna assume French by that name. A French plane they had gotten the rights for, and they started pumping them out.
Yeah. And then didn't who produced the engines for the airplanes? What was the best engine that came along?
So the engines, uh, it was the Liberty engine, right? I believe.
Yeah, yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So we'll get a little bit into how that was developed in a second because we had just name dropped NACA
Oh
and
yeah,
they're a big part of how that whole engine came to be. But there were a couple controversies um that we might want to talk about, which also comes into play when we talk about NACA. So many people wanted to focus on like US designs because we were so far behind. We wanted the US industry to improve. So we wanted to focus on making our own designs. Some other people just had the opposite idea and they wanted to take as many European designs as they could so we would learn how to make the planes and stuff, which is I thought it's a pretty good idea because they were
yeah,
better than us. Like they were better than us. And yeah, so there were some things and then yeah, those are some controversies with the whole airplane manufacturing during World War One.
for sure.
But then yeah, we can move into NACA now, which is like I said, the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics.
Yeah. So
Let's see, they were yeah, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I we saw that NACA did a lot of stuff here, and a lot of people know NACA as NASA now. So
Mhm.
1958, that's when they transferred over to NASA.
Yep.
And what else can you tell us about NACA?
So NACA it began in 1915 during the war, and it was patterned along the British Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, which is like
Mhm.
the British version of it.
Yeah,
And this was this was approved by, sorry, let me check my notes right here. Yeah, it was President Howard Taft he kind of started it. He initially appointed a group that was called the National Aerodynamical Laboratory Commission that year, but unfortunately that one was shut down and or shut down by Congress. They didn't give them no money.
yeah,
But this one, NACA, they snuck it into a different bill, and that allowed them to gain $5,000 in funding, which is not a lot, but it's a little something for the time being at least.
yeah.
And the mission for NACA is as follows. It shall be the duty of the advisory committee for aeronautics to supervise and direct the scientific study of the problems of flight with a uh practical view to their solutions. You wanna maybe say something about what that might mean?
Yeah,
Like,
so I think it kind of meant that they were trying to create they were trying to create things that would enhance technology in the future. They're trying to create a better organization nationally for the development of space and aircraft, and
mhm,
they're trying to advance the United States forward,
yeah,
catch up with the rest of the world, stuff like that. Trying to be the leaders, I guess.
yeah, I agree. I agree with all that.
Yeah. So if we want to jump over to the cross licensing agreement now, so that was kind of when all those designs and ideas that had been previously made by all the big heads in
Mhm,
aviation in the United States, the Wrights, Curtis, those type of people. The Wrights actually got a full patent for their airplane, so that restricted a lot of people from making airplanes, making airplane designs, anything like that. So that's probably one of the main factors in why the U.S. was so far behind.
mm,
Along with the war, we didn't have the needs for aircraft in the war like the Europeans did initially, but
mhm,
then we did eventually. But
yeah,
also the licensing, or also the patents. We just they kind of block each other. So there was a there's a term called blocking, like patents blocking each other, and that means neither of them can really do anything because they intertwine and both prevent the other from enhancing technology in a certain way.
mhm,
So that whole mess right there really slowed down the U.S.'s production of airplanes and technology in uh, that era. But so in 1906, that's when the Wright brothers got the first patent for their airplane. That's the one I was talking about. That happened in 1906. And then in 1909, that was the start of when Glenn Curtiss and the Wright brothers had the legal battles about Glenn Curtiss infringing on that patent. So when they did that, it obviously caused an uproar between the two, and a lot of money was spent, and a lot of time was spent just gnawing away at each other. But in 1917, the U.S. seemed to be on the verge of maybe joining the war, so they kind of had to start making planes. And right before that, in 1916, the Wright Martin Company, which is just a combination of the Wright Company and the Martin Company, they
Gotcha.
they got actually a 5% royalty on all aircraft manufacturers if they used aileron or the wingtip designs with the control. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, so it was either 5% royalty or $10,000 minimum per year for the manufacturer. So that obviously cut into some manufacturers' profit. Um, and Curtis actually was forced into demanding royalties due to attorney fees and litigation costs. He didn't really want to, but he had to because he was just losing a bunch of money. So he had to do the same thing. And then finally, nationalization of the aircraft industry was kind of discussed. And the effect that the cross licensing agreement had was it allowed all these companies in the I believe it was called the Aircraft Manufacturer Association. They were all able to join in and use each other's technology to enhance the airplanes and build a better future for aircraft. So when that happened, we kind of started taking off, and the patents were kind of never talked about again. And just there went the U.S. aviation, and that's kind of it.
Oh, all right. Well, yeah, and then I just want to say that that this whole cross licensing agreement stuff was one of the best things that NACA did during World War I, right?
Yeah,
Like they saw this whole patent nonsense was a huge issue on why the United States aviation as a whole was like so far behind Europe. So
yeah,
yeah, NACO was a good shout out to them for that.
yeah,
And then like I wanted to mention a little thing if we like dive a little bit into like the future of NACA. Obviously, we know it as NASA now, but
hmm,
like you said, they took over. NASA took over NACA's efforts in 1958, I believe you said it was. Yeah, 58. And like they were responsible for so many different things. Like in our time, in our life, they're one of the reasons why aviation is what it is today. They started off with their wooden prop biplanes and stuff, and then working into World War II, which also led to a huge boom in aviation with different aircraft like the P-51 Mustang and the Corsair and all those things, those United or those American designs basically. And then like turning to the jet age, they weren't directly responsible, but no, they were pretty directly responsible for the part they played in with the US Air Force and Bell
yeah,
aircraft to design the first supersonic plane. And if you take a look at that aircraft, that first supersonic plane that took flight in 1941, you can see how similar it is to the jets that we have nowadays, which is crazy because looking at 1941 is when they first hit supersonic speed, right? And that was only 30 something years after World War I, right? It's crazy how quickly they were able to develop and improve and innovate and all that stuff.
okay, yeah, I
Yeah.
totally agree. I mean, if you look at the development of aircraft, just in 50 years or so, it was like 50 or 60 years since
Hmm.
when the Wright brothers flew. Then we were on the moon in 50 or 60 years.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's crazy
And
how fast it went.
it is, and I mean, it kind of the development of technology has kind of gone into efficiency nowadays,
Hmm.
so that people can save money. It's all about money at the end of the day.
It's all, yeah,
It's all
you're
about money.
definitely
So
right.
if the airlines are going to save money, then they'll put their efforts into doing efficiency because that's what they know the airlines are going to buy.
Oh
And
yeah.
but it's crazy what might come up in the next 50 years or
Hmm.
so.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and like talking about World War I, World War II just shows how much development innovation happens because of war. We talked about that a little bit during class, but it's just crazy to see how far we've come in like like just over 100 years ago, they're flying those paper planes, not paper, but you know what I mean. Uh, Now we're trying to get supersonic. Actually, they already had those, but like space flight, all that private
Yeah.
pilot stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Commercial space flight and
yeah,
stuff.
commercial space flight. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, Corbin, overall, I think it was a good podcast here. We talked about the
yeah,
World War One, NACA, the end of the patent uh, litigation, and then all the cross licensing agreements.
definitely.
So yeah, it was nice
Yeah,
talking about the chapter, and um,
yeah. We got through a lot of stuff. I
hope
appreciate
everybody
it.
learned something,
Hmm.
something more than we learned in class. But other than that, I'm good to wrap it up here.